and China have concluded a business investment deal. In a video conference, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and French President Emmanuel Macron to finalize the agreement. The deal, known as the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, or CAI, will grant substantial market access to EU investors. Now, the deal creates a better balance in EU-China trade relations. The official Xinhua news agency reported President Xi said the deal will offer bigger markets and a better business environment for both China and the EU. After 7 years of these difficult negotiations, Chancellor Merkel pushed fellow Europeans to reach a deal before the year-end deadline, but the agreement could harm the new Biden administration's relationship with Brussels. Joining me now to discuss, Boombust co-host Ben Swan and host of Economic Update, author of The Sickness is Assistant Professor Richard Wolff. Professor Wolff, let's begin with you. What does this investment deal mean for European companies, and what does it mean for China?
Well, basically what it does is it smooths out the relationship between the European Union on the one hand and China, making it easier for trade, for capital flows, for investment, for a closer development between the two countries. It encourages investment in both directions. It is a very important change. There had been a lot of obstacles. I think two things made it happen. Brexit, the fact that Europe is now minus the British compared to what it was before. And the other thing was Mr. Trump's nationalism and hostility to China. That meant that both Europe and China were faced with problems that they're now going to solve in part by a closer relationship with one another. And that is a way in which people can see a new world economic order emerging.
Well, the United States is concerned. The new incoming Biden administration, they are worried because they are trying to get European allies to go harder on China. And with this new deal, they're trying to obviously negotiate and implement these new economic deals that will help the relationship between the two countries. But Ben, I do want to ask you, as there's a new number report that shows that China is going to overtake the U.S. within this decade as the #1 economy in the world. We've talked about this before. It looks like it's going to happen sooner rather than later. What does this mean for the United States?
Well, it is going to happen sooner rather than later. Later was at least 10 years. Now we're looking at about 7 years, about 3 years sooner than we had thought. And it might even be sooner than that, because keep in mind, when you're looking at these numbers, when you don't include things like worldwide pandemics that shut down supply chains, and then we watch as China redoubles its effort and gets manufacturing moving again at a breakneck pace, and the U.S. has not done that, and other countries have not done that. China is on pace, actually, maybe to get there even sooner than 7 years from now. But here's what's really fascinating, is that what the Chinese have managed to do is they have become not only the most desirable market in the world for every company and every manufacturer, right, who wants their products, their goods, their items to be sold in China. And by the way, that really is the value of what China is bringing to this European trade deal. The European manufacturers and companies that are trying to get into China are thrilled at the idea that they have access to it. The U.S. wants to slow that down, and the U.S. has attempted on many levels to slow that down. But the problem that they run into over and over and over again is that China has all the bargaining chips. China holds everything right now. They create a lot of the manufacturing, but they also have access to the markets that everybody wants access to. So it's a win-win for the Chinese. It's also a win for the Chinese in that as much as the U.S. might want to create disruption for Chinese technologies right now, the Chinese have managed to go around the U.S. That One Belt, One Road initiative is a very powerful way of kind of seducing and pushing other countries to play along. And I don't say that in a way that says, see, the Chinese are manipulating, because the U.S. wrote the playbook on manipulation of other countries. We've done it for decades. It's just now the Chinese are doing it better than we are, and that's why we're frustrated.
What do they say? The student soon then becomes a teacher.
Yeah.
But
that's what they say.
Especially, well, it can though. China can. China's also wanted to go into the EU's energy sector as well. I know that was a big key part of this trade, right?
Yeah, absolutely it is. But it's bigger than even just that. It's the fact that the Chinese have figured out ways to say, if we want to have unilateral relationships in Africa, across Europe, we don't need the United States to be the broker of those things. And the problem is that for many, many decades, the U.S. has been the sole broker of all those kinds of agreements. If you want to do business worldwide, you have to have the U.S.'s blessing. That is no longer the case. It is becoming the case where now you have to have China's blessing. And the Chinese have, yes, they've manipulated markets to make that happen. Yes, they've manipulated the global situation to make it happen. But again, you can't say that and not recognize that the U.S. did it first. We were the initial country that was doing that for the past several decades to say we'll control who gets to do business with whom. Now the Chinese get to do it.
Professor Wolf, I want to talk about these numbers that predict that China is going to become obviously the world's largest economy in just 7 years. China has not fully recovered from the shock of the coronavirus pandemic. We did find out that exports did grow by 21%. We talked about this a few weeks ago. What's going on here?
Well, I think what you're seeing, and it's painful for me to have to say it, but there's no way around it. The Chinese adopted a really strict, harsh lockdown early in this pandemic. The best example was the city with millions of people in it, Wuhan. If you go to Wuhan today, and there was just a report the other day from public radio, if you go to Wuhan today, people are not wearing masks, they're going to clubs, not in violation of the lockdown, but because they don't need it anymore. They demonstrated that that kind of mobilization of both public and private to confront this disease in the starkest way possible turns out to have been the best economic policy. Trading off between pandemic and economics, which is what we were told here, turns out to have been a big mistake. And Ben is quite right that their better solution for the pandemic is now helping them make the economic gains that are really changing the playbook for how the world economy is going to work. And here's a final irony about the deal with Europe. The last time, historically, Europe went to China, it went to carve China up. The Germans, the French, the Belgians, the Spanish, everybody took a piece of China, basically, and ran it. Now the shoe is very much on the other foot, and the Chinese are very conscious of the history, the historic reversal of the role. Now Europe comes offering deals in a completely different relationship that is much more like equals than it is the old colonial system. And I think it marks a real turning point for much of the world that is also going in that direction.
Well, and much like Ben said, it looks like China has the upper hand here. They're trying to make deals with the EU, with other countries, while the United States is still on this trade war, going hard on China. Ben, there's a belief that there's a coming backlash against China from global powers. Obviously, the United States is one of them, pressuring the European Union and its allies to work to really retaliate and work kind of against China, so to speak. Is there any truth to this besides this example I just gave?
Yeah, I think there is. I do think we're going to see more of a pushback and more kind of global backlash. We've already seen it across the board in certain ways. For instance, with the technology sector, the Huawei story, which we've covered extensively, as you know, there is certainly some backlash that's there. And Xi Jinping, China's leader, is really in an interesting position because he is pushing very hard right now to really move forward at a breakneck pace to really dominate the world in terms of what China is able to do. I think the problem, again, that the U.S. is going to run into is that we have put ourselves in a position where we are far more dependent on China than they are on us. And if we learned anything during this protracted trade war between the Trump administration and China, it's that the Chinese didn't really have a whole lot to sweat here. Yes, there are some companies in China that were unhappy with it, but the truth is that the Chinese come out of that situation in a much better position than we came out of it, because what jobs really did come back? None. Manufacturing, did it come back? Nope, sure didn't. but the Chinese still have the upper hand pretty much across the board in that way. And that tells you something about where the rest of the world stands. And I think the professor's right when he says there is far more humility coming out of Europe dealing with China today than there was in the past.
Professor Richard Wolff, Ben Swan. Ben, stick around. We have another story for you later, but thank you both for your time today.